it was refreshing. And then everybody started talking about it, and we went back and looked at a couple more films, and then
You might have pictured Clint Eastwood as this steady, wise legend who never cracked, but that image falls apart fast once you hear what really went down. At 95, the icon finally slipped the mask, exposing a side of himself that's sharper, colder, and way more complicated than anyone expected. And the wildest part? He's calling out 6 major stars who he says switched up on him when he needed loyalty the most. These weren't random co-workers. These were people who stood with him through major wins, red carpets, and Hollywood hype, only to turn around and leave cuts he never forgot. And once you hear the first name on that list, you'll understand exactly why Clint kept these memories locked up for years. Number 1, Leonardo DiCaprio, the so-called golden boy. This wasn't some small disagreement. This was the moment Clint Eastwood reached his limit. What could push Clint to walk off his own movie set like that? Believe it or not, the answer is Leonardo DiCaprio himself. Back in 2010, when J. Edgar kicked off filming, everybody thought it was a perfect combo. Hollywood's calmest director paired with its most intense actor. But behind the scenes, word is, it turned into a quiet disaster almost immediately. Folks on set say DiCaprio showed up loaded with folders, handwritten notes, pages of research, and even marked up FBI documents like he was prepping for a trial instead of a movie. At first, Clint tried to let it slide, but crew members said his patience wore thin fast. He even joked, "He came in like a detective trying to solve me," adding, "and I wasn't the case." But everyone could tell that joke carried real frustration behind it. The tension kept building, and it didn't take long before everything snapped during that emotional breakdown scene. Leo smashed that scene in a single take, raw, sharp, and so locked in that the whole room went still like everybody forgot to breathe. Clint whispered, "Perfect, cut." But Leo wasn't done. He wanted another take, then another. By the 6th one, Clint wasn't even behind the camera anymore. He was leaning on the craft table with a cup of coffee, staring like the soul had drained out of him. Someone quietly checked on him, asking if he was all right, and Clint just muttered, "He's still searching for something. I already found mine." And that line hit everyone like a cold slap. When filming wrapped, there were no warm goodbyes, no handshake moment, just heavy silence. Casting talks after that played out the same way. Every time DiCaprio's name came up, Clint shut it down without blinking. He'd simply say, "Great actor, but not my kind," and that was it. Door closed. They never reunited, never shared a stage, never even swapped a simple hello since that day. Leo eventually grabbed his Oscar, but he never got another Eastwood call because to Clint, perfection means doing it once, doing it clean, and not dragging the moment out with endless repeats. Now number 2, Michael Moore. The man Clint says crossed a line he could never walk back from. The moment Michael Moore compared American Sniper to Nazi propaganda, it was like he hit a switch that shut down any chance of respect between them. Clint didn't shout or argue, he just iced him out completely and permanently. But the truth is, this tension wasn't new. It had been building since 2005, when Clint stood on stage at the National Board of Review Awards and growled, "If Michael Moore ever shows up at my door with a camera, I'll kill him." The crowd let out this awkward, nervous laugh, but Clint stayed stone still, staring straight ahead before walking off stage without a single smile. That wasn't a joke. That was Clint drawing a hard line in the dirt, and anyone who knows him understands exactly why. To get why this grudge runs so deep, you have to know what Clint actually stands for. Discipline, quiet work, old-school honor, and a sense of duty he doesn't play around with. So when Moore's documentaries, especially Fahrenheit 9/11, came off to Clint like loud politics wrapped in flashy editing, he felt like the whole thing was disrespectful. "He sees soldiers as pawns. I see them as heroes," Eastwood once told a friend in a rare moment where he let fire slip through his voice. For him, it wasn't about awards or debates, it was about respect. Then nearly a decade later, Moore went online and mocked American Sniper, saying it reminded him of the Nazi sniper movie in *Inglourious Bastards*. He tried to brush it off by saying it was just a joke, but people close to Clint said he was absolutely done with him after that. One longtime collaborator explained it perfectly. He doesn't forget insults, he deletes them. And that's exactly what Clint did. After that tweet, Moore's name basically vanished from Clint's world. Clint has worked with every kind of personality, left, right, whatever. But he refuses to deal with anyone who disrespects soldiers, even in a joke. To him, Moore didn't just cross the line, he stomped on it. Mention Michael Moore around Clint today, and the conversation shuts down instantly. Now number 3, Barbra Streisand, the perfectionist who managed to irritate the cowboy himself. If there's one name that still tightens Clint Eastwood's jaw after almost 9 decades in the business, it's Barbra Streisand. She got under his skin so deeply that he still avoids saying her name in interviews, and their feud has become one of Hollywood's coldest silent wars. It all kicked off in the early 1980s, back when both of them were shifting from acting to directing. Barbra was famous for total control, 40, 50, sometimes even 60 takes just to lock in one single expression. Clint moved completely differently, working like every moment mattered. 2 takes max, then on to the next shot. He was known for saying, if it's not real the first time, it's not worth filming, and he lived by that rule like it was law. Barbra became the walking symbol of everything Clint thought had gone sideways in the new Hollywood era. Too much control, too much vanity, and way too much obsessive overthinking. By the early 90s, their clashing styles had grown into straight-up disrespect, and neither one bothered hiding it anymore. Things really blew up after The Prince of Tides failed to land Streisand a Best Director nomination in 1992, and Clint was overheard telling a friend, maybe if she made decisions faster, she'd finish more than 3 films in 15 years. That one line tore through the industry like a storm. Then came The Bridges of Madison County, the moment that completely shattered whatever thin truce they had left. Barbra had been attached to direct the film, but after years of wavering and second-guessing, she stepped away. Clint moved in fast, rewrote the script, took the director's chair, and turned the story into a soft, powerful classic that hit people right in the heart. The movie got Meryl Streep an Oscar nomination, and Clint got the quiet satisfaction of proving exactly what instinct can do when you stop overthinking everything. Since that moment, the two have avoided each other like they're living on opposite sides of the map. To Clint, Barbra turned into the ultimate example of everything he rejects in filmmaking: hesitation, tight control, and the slow death of natural instinct. In Clint's world, you make the move, you trust your gut, and you don't shoot the same moment 50 times. Number 4, Tommy Lee Jones, the one alpha Clint couldn't break or calm down. On the very first day Tommy stepped onto the set of In the Line of Fire in 1993, Clint supposedly leaned toward a crew member and muttered, "2 bulls in 1 pen, this won't last." And he was right, it didn't. At first people thought the pairing would be legendary, but behind the scenes it felt more like a silent battle of wills. Tommy Lee Jones wasn't the type to take soft-spoken direction. He barked orders, pushed back on notes, rewrote lines on the fly, and kept going way past the word cut like he was running the set himself. Clint, who worked quietly, fast, and smooth, just watched him with this stunned look, trying to figure out what he was even witnessing. He'd stay in character between takes, one technician recalled. Clint would just stare like, "What are you doing?" And that confusion only grew as the tension kept building. The tension finally snapped during one explosive confrontation scene. Tommy Lee Jones stepped in towering over Clint, locked into character, firing every line with this sharp, intense energy that felt more like a challenge than a performance. The director called cut, but Jones just kept going, staring straight into Clint's eyes like he wasn't done proving something. The whole crew froze, waiting to see what Clint would do next. After a long, uncomfortable silence, Clint leaned in toward his assistant and whispered, "Life's too short for that kind of theater." Then he simply walked off the set without a second glance. And from that moment on, the decision was quietly carved in stone. Clint was done. Later, when casting directors floated Jones's name for future Eastwood projects, Clint shut it down instantly. He'd say, "He's a great actor, but we don't speak the same language," which was his calm way of saying never again. They never reunited, never shared a panel, never even brought each other up in interviews. In Clint's mind, there's only room for one alpha on his set, and he's the one who gets to call cut. Now number 5, Richard Burton, the star whose drinking pushed Clint's patience right to the edge. Clint Eastwood doesn't lose his cool easily, but Richard Burton came dangerously close back in 1968 while filming Where Eagles Dare. This wasn't about ego or fame, it was about work ethic, something Clint treats like a sacred rule. Burton would show up late, stumbling, slurring lines, sometimes smelling like he hadn't slept since the night before. Meanwhile, Clint arrived at dawn, clean, focused, fully ready to work. He'd just stand there watching Burton struggle through take after take, and one crew member swore you could literally see the respect draining off Clint's face like water. Burton was stuck in the middle of his chaotic marriage with Elizabeth Taylor at the time, and every night seemed to end in another bar, another argument, another spiral before showing up to set the next morning. Every morning, the whole crew had to deal with the fallout from Burton's long nights, and Clint felt it more than anyone. He didn't raise his voice, didn't lecture, didn't make a scene. He just waited in this cold, steady silence that got sharper by the day. And when Burton messed up the same line for the 10th time, Clint finally muttered, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not by the hour." And that line hit the crew so hard they let out a nervous laugh. Burton didn't laugh. He knew exactly what Clint meant. But the real breaking point came when Burton got overheard calling the movie a paycheck job. And to Eastwood, that was straight-up disrespect. Clint believes every film deserves full effort, even a wild action flick, and hearing someone shrug it off like that cut deep. Years later, when someone asked Clint about Burton, he didn't bother polishing the memory. He just said, "Talented guy, wasted talent," and left it right there. No extra words needed. The movie ended up becoming a hit, but the partnership didn't survive the set. Clint never worked with Burton again and never spoke about him after that. For a man who treats silence like a blade, Burton's fate was sealed forever. Now number 6. Jean Seberg, the woman Clint says pushed his patience past its limit. Clint Eastwood doesn't bring up Paint Your Wagon anymore, and the reason is Jean Seberg. She wasn't just a co-star in the 1969 musical. She was the reason Clint swore he'd never mix sympathy with work ever again. Seberg came into the film already dealing with intense pressure, unpredictable moods, and even FBI surveillance over her political activism, and all that weight showed on set. One day she'd brighten the room with a smile, and the next she'd lock herself in her trailer for hours, leaving everyone waiting. Clint was the total opposite: focused, steady, and allergic to emotional chaos. By the 3rd week, he was worn down. She'd stop mid-scene to talk about her motivation, and a script supervisor remembered Clint just staring at the floor, waiting for her to finish like he was holding his breath. "You could see him dying inside," the supervisor said, and everyone around felt it too. But the real explosion didn't hit until later, when Paint Your Wagon bombed and the blame started getting tossed around. Seberg went to the press and claimed Clint's wooden performance dragged the whole movie down, and to him that felt like the deepest kind of betrayal. He had spent months trying to hold that shaky production together, and hearing her flip the story in public hit him like a punch he never saw coming. From that moment on, she was finished in his world. He refused to say her name again, ever. If someone brought her up, he'd shift the topic instantly, light a cigar, and walk off like he couldn't hear a single thing behind him. That was Clint's version of a slammed door. Cold, clean, and final. Years later, when news broke about Seberg's tragic death in 1979, Clint didn't make any public statement, but people close to him said he looked genuinely sad for a moment before his guard went right back up. He didn't celebrate it, didn't mock it, didn't twist it. He just stayed quiet. "Some people aren't cut out for the work," he once said softly, "and I don't need to deal with it twice," which was the closest he ever came to forgiveness.
Clint never rewrote the story, never softened the edges, never changed the way he handled it. In his world, once someone crosses a certain line, the silence speaks louder than any comeback ever could.